Welcome, everybody. My name is Sia, and I am a curator at MoCDA. Today, we are speaking with Pindar Van Arman for our 10 Questions in 10 Minutes collaboration with SuperRare. Pindar Van Arman is an artist that uses AI and robotics to deconstruct and automate the creative process. Since his start 15 years ago, he has exhibited at notable art institutions around the globe and has been featured by organizations like CNN, HBO Vice, and The Guardian. He has most recently launched a collaboration with photographer Kitty Simpson called Artonomous, where he hopes to bring his robots closer to creating fine art. Thank you so much for joining us, Pindar.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to answer these questions.
Yeah, we're really grateful that you could join us. So just to start off with these 10 questions, the first one, where did your fascination with robotics and art begin?
Yeah. Art always. I think most people, whatever your art is, has always been into art, and I've always been a painter. And I used to paint constantly, but then I had a family, and all of a sudden I found myself like spending more time like with my children and enjoying that. So the painting fell by the wayside. And then I got into this thing called the DARPA Grand Challenge, where me and a bunch of teammates were building a self-driving car, and I learned all about AI. And we competed in the desert, and I was like, you know what, this AI can drive a car. I wonder if it could help me out on something more practical, painting. And so my first robots were just to buy me more time. Like if a painting took 10 hours, I imagine let's get it done in 9 with a robot, then I'd just spend 1 hour, and I'd have time for my family and my painting.
It's a very practical solution.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Next question for you. Have your robotics ever made an unexpected decision, or a decision you felt was actually better than one that you would have made in the same situation?
Yeah, the secret to that is all the time. And the secret to that is just serendipity. Accidentally, they'll do something awesome. And while they use these feedback loops and they're always paying attention to what they paint and making more marks, they never know what they do is good or not. So I'm watching it. Like right now, it's paused in the background. I'll start it up after these questions. And if I see it doing something cool because it's just experimenting, I'll go and reprogram and say, hey, the algorithm that was doing this with that color, I'll pump up, I'll like turn the volume up on that, so to speak, and follow that direction. And so a lot of art just like evolves and comes out of that.
So it's actually a very organic process. You kind of like the second something interesting happens, you kind of capture that and like try to turn it up to 11 and see what actually.
Yeah, it's back and forth. And I'd say about half my paintings, only less than half my paintings, like I don't interfere at all. But I'm always working with them, always changing the code.
Sure. Okay, third question for you. Are humans necessary to your art?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, if there was no humans, no one would appreciate it, right? So, and it's also, the interesting thing, even though I work with robotics, I try and capture the humanity. That's my goal. And I think right now I've shown a picture of my wife. I'm just always painting as much as possible people I know and people I love, and that just brings out like this I guess this juxtaposition of like mechanically produced art. But at the same time, I'm trying to get all the emotions behind it and all of the emotions behind my relationship with these people, with these portrait subjects.
Right. Actually, kind of building off of that, we had a question from Twitter, which was, why portraits and not landscapes?
Oh, yeah. Robotic art is like, I made my first ones, like my first painting robots like 15 years ago, but robotic art's been around forever, probably 40, 50 years. And I always thought it was cool when someone would take a robot and just have it splatter paint and do random things, and they'd just make a generative system out of it. But it lacked two things. One thing is it lacked skill or like intent. Like I've seen a Roomba with a paintbrush on the back of it, just like going back and forth, hitting the walls. And it made cool patterns, but, it was sort of like random. And I thought to myself, like it would be more interesting if a robot was trying to do something and trying to get better at doing some specific task. And then when I was thinking of all the possibilities, the reason portraits came to mind is because once again, you have this mechanical machine trying to make something more human. And portraits are very easy to do. Wrong, they're not easy. They're hard, but you can do them very well with a lot of practice. And so a robot would excel at that. But then the really good portraits have that emotion behind them. And so it's like I'm trying to pick the hardest thing it would be for a robot to paint, which is portraits. Everything else seemed easier. But to capture someone's eyes, their personality and all that in the portrait. That just seemed harder. And I was like, you know what, that should be the goal, the hardest possible thing to paint.
Right. And then when they do that, you've succeeded.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when someone, this is another painting that came out, is when someone loves their portrait so much that they put it as their profile picture, or they put it on, Instagram or Twitter. That is like the ultimate sign that I did a good portrait.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Next question for you. How consciously do you think about the style of your robot's portraits when designing their AI?
I try and keep it consistent. I used to just with the AI, it can go in any direction. And one day I can paint like Picasso if Picasso is the inputs, and another day I could paint like Paul Klee if Paul Klee was the inputs. But I don't want it to paint like other artists. I want it to paint like itself. So a couple years back, like 3 or 4 years back, I started feeding it data from itself, from all the previous paintings it had made. And then I was trying to get to something that most artists need, which is like a look. It's always important for an artist to have a look, that someone sees a new painting from a specific artist, or a duo like me and the robots, that they recognize it as a Pindar and autonomous. So I'm trying to get there, and it's important to me that it be consistent. But you know what? Every so often a new project starts and it goes in a totally different direction, and I'll just follow that as well.
Right. Very authentic, just following our leads.
Yeah.
Next question for you. What made you decide to enter the digital art space and mint your physical artworks as NFTs?
People are always asking me how, SuperRare. I have a bunch of friends that are trying to get into SuperRare right now, and they're always asking me how I got into it. And I would say it was pure luck. Back in the beginning, I think I was like, I don't know which number I was, but I mean, I have some NFTs like in the 100s. And they would accept anyone back then. I remember after I applied to SuperRare, I was like wondering, is this going to be a good organization? Is it going to be hard? They let me in. I was like, oh, this is not that. This is not going to be that great. They're not very selective. Was my first thought. I guess
Sure.
2 years.
No, definitely. Next question for you. You frequently mention artist Paul Klee's concept of a creative feedback loop when describing the process of your robot's art. How do you see these feedback loops differing in today's digital world than in the 19th and 20th century, in which Paul Klee was an active artist?
Yeah, the whole idea of feedback loops is an artist, and by the way, I think it might be his birthday. I saw some activity on him on Twitter today, Paul Klee. But feedback loops, his whole idea, and it's the first time feedback loops it sounds like a computer science term, but the first time I heard it was from this artist. And the idea is like you make a mark, you take a step back, see how the mark's affecting the canvas, make another mark. And over again, artist does this every brushstroke, as well as every couple hours, you might take a total step back. It's like, is this the direction I'm going? And these are feedback loops, and he thought it was key to the creative process. So what was interesting, what I see now is in digital world, you go through these feedback loops, but they're much more macro level. They're not on the micro level. It's not per brushstroke. It's almost like, you apply a filter and you ask yourself how the filter is working. So I'd say it's identical in theory, but it's depending on the medium and this feedback, like when an artist looks at a work and decides if whatever change they're doing makes a difference, and should they go in that direction or back up a bit. It's similar, but since the tools are different, you're getting different effects. It's much faster now, meaning I would say it's just much faster now, and it's a lot more wild because there's so many more possibilities. That's why there's so much variety.
Yeah. Especially when you add those cameras onto your robot's work, and they actually have the opportunity to take a step back, look at the artwork, and then think of their previous style that you've programmed into it, and then just go off from there. So
they're always doing that, and they do that every 100 strokes. And then they also do that every couple hours. They take a step back and say, is this, is the contrast good? And then it might totally change the direction. So it does it both on a technical, and it tries to do it on an emotional level, but all the emotional levels are just mimicking things I would want. It's of course not its own emotions.
Sure. Next question for you. In your TEDx talk, you mentioned that you were looking forward to the day when your robot's creativity surpasses yours. What do you think that might look like, and how close do you think that day is?
They're already more creative than me, and that's because I always get painter's block. When I paint on my own, I might go days where I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. But my routine, my morning ritual is just turn it on no matter what, and it tries different things. And I just let it run in the background until I see it doing something interesting, then I'll jump in. So creative definitely more creative on the technical aspects than I am. But what I think is really more interesting is when will it be artistic? When will a robot be create art? And that's the most exciting thing about the future of AI for me is like, I can't wait until someone figures it out and makes a generative art system so complex and so like the human mind and also conscious that this generative arts system says, hey, I got something I want to tell everyone, and actually tells us something and tells us something on its own, not, me telling it to tell you something. And when a robot does that, I think that's going to be the greatest moment of my life. And I think it's coming. I think I'm going to live to see it. And because that would mean we're not alone in this universe. We're not the only intelligent being. And imagine seeing art from another species. What will that art look like? What will it want to share with us? It'll be fascinating. And I wouldn't even be surprised if most AI art is just made for other AIs in the end. And there's only a little crossover between human and AI art because we're not really interested in whatever AI is interested in. But I mean, on the stuff we agree on, like maybe it's like they too are wondering why we're in this universe and what we're doing here. I think that'd be great art.
Yeah, definitely. Ninth question for you. What is something you've kept with you from the beginning of your art practice?
But brushes, even though I've gone into AI and robotics and digital world, I've just kept this traditional brushstroke, brushes and paint. And I think that ties it all together from the very beginning, even from before I had robots.
Just something always physical and tangible that you can have.
Yeah.
And finally, the last question for you. What is next for you?
I'm really enjoying a bunch of collaborations. I'm finding, I love portraits. So right now I'm just doing as many portraits of as many people as I can find. And I prefer portraits. I think it's really good portraits are when you know the person. So I like to and also when you get to know someone. So I'm doing lots of portraits with people in the crypto art space, people in the AI art space, people in the art space. And then there's another project that I'm starting to talk more and more about because it just got set up. Is I just set up one of my robots in a children's hospital, and I got the AI painting along with children, and so it's part of the art therapy program now, where kids for whatever reason don't want to participate in art therapy. Maybe they would want to participate with a robot. Others there's kids with limited mobility, and they would be able to paint. So there's all sorts of reasons that I'm probably going to concentrate on that project for the next year. I just came from there this morning where I was talking to the art therapist, and they're amazing people. It's going to be, I don't even know where it's going to go. None of us know where it's going to go. It's a big experiment, and that's the big thing that's coming up for me for the next year.
Right. But that's half the fun is figuring out where it's going to go along the way.
Yeah. It's going to be funny, actually. It's going to be crazy.
All right. Well, that was 10 questions in 10 minutes. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and see you here same time next week.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Pindar.